My name is Glenn Beck, and for some strange reason, I get a lot of funny looks throughout the course of my typical day. But if I were being honest, most of those, "Come on, Glenn, what are you, an idiot?" stares come from my own staff. Don't get me wrong, those looks are usually delivered not without provocation. I deserve most of them. But if you know me, you know what I believe in my heart. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, even when no one but you understands why. It was back in 2001 when I learned about Israel. My agent, George Hiltzik, had suggested that I take a trip there. Up until that visit, I thought Israel was just a land of burning buses.
I said, "Glenn, I have an idea. Why don't you go to Israel? And I think you will learn a tremendous amount. And one of your hallmarks is getting on the air and telling the truth. And I think the media is not telling the full story about Israel."
My wife, Tanya, and I did the things most people do in Israel. We visited the holy sites and enjoyed the beauty of the land. But it was a side trip that I took with our tour guide that made the lasting impression on me.
If they go to like a Home Depot kind of store, that if you remember from the Scud missile crisis, all the Israelis had gas masks. So they go into this store, and Glenn's looking behind the counter, and he sees a small plastic something, and he turns to the clerk and says, "What is that?" And the clerk says, "Well, this is a small plastic container for babies, and if you notice, there's a little hole for straw, because if there's a Scud attack, babies have to breathe, have to get liquids." And Glenn was totally taken by that.
I was taken by that. For me, Israel wasn't just a place on a map anymore. It was the home of our Jewish brothers and sisters. I was one of millions of people making that discovery. For me, it took visiting Israel. For my friend John Voight, he made the same discovery while doing a movie.
And I did a wonderful movie called John Paul II, the story of the Pope, who I loved very much. He was a great guy. But when he looked at the Jewish people, he called them he says, you are elder brother. And that's a beautiful way of saying it, an association with this religion, which gave so much to the world. The Jewish religion has been influential of every religion since.
John and I have discussed the plight of the Israeli people. Evil is trying to erase them from history, not just as a people, but their history. They stand in the land that God gave them because of courage, or is it survival? I'd been reading a lot of George Whitefield. He's an 18th century preacher who had traveled through Britain and eventually America. I am not a preacher. Let me say that again. I am not a preacher. But for some reason, I was feeling compelled in my prayer time to look at George Whitefield and take my stand. I had the privilege of meeting Billy Graham last year. He gave me a book. On the book was printed the words, "Billy Graham, God's Ambassador." I don't know anybody who could be called God's ambassador except Billy Graham. But then it hit me. I should strive to be freedom's ambassador, not just to America, but to the world.
I mean, we got all these rights, but we've distanced ourselves from our responsibilities. We'll use our free speech to do anything, say anything, no responsibility. And what Glenn has really done is focused down and said, okay, we've had a civil rights movement, now it's time to have a civil responsibilities movement. America has a long connection with the Jewish people, even when there was no Jewish nation. I mean, these are our brothers. You take founding fathers like Elias Boudinot, who's president of Congress, who oversaw the revolution. He used his own money to bring persecuted Jews to America out of Europe because they were being killed and slaughtered in Europe.
I've talked about the growing darkness of the world for a number of years, and evil is extraordinarily smart. Look at what's happening in the world. So much is repeating the last century. I realized that I had to take on a special mission. I also realized I didn't really have a choice. I called my staff together.
Yeah, you can stand up here. See, I would like to put the stage here, right here. And they said no to this, Liz?
It'll be online too, but if you want to do something where people are still... Glenn brought us all into the office and just announced that he wanted to do this event, and he wasn't sure what it was going to be, but he wanted to go and investigate, Jerusalem. He wanted to revisit it again.
We are not going there to make any more trouble or to make things more intense. We are going, though, to stand. It has to have the same feel as 828.
I reacted the same way everybody else in the company reacted, which was why and why now?
If you said to me, we'd like to do this event in Israel, and with all of the political nuance and pressures and risk and safety risk and just, global incident potential, how much time do you need to plan that? I'd say, give me a good year.
Needless to say, no one on my staff was in support of another event.
This is different from 828 because you have to buy tickets to go, right? You have to spend $10,000 to go. So you can't drive 200 miles and stay in Hotel 6. You have to spend $10,000.
But the great thing about the group of people I work with is that they understand when I feel I absolutely have to do something. I love them for that, because I was asking more from them than I had ever asked before.
When we talked about the 824 event, like the 828 event, it was like, golly, Glenn was talking about, I just ran the gauntlet on that, and I'm going to do it again. But he really said he felt like this is something that had to be done. This is the right time.
Within 2 weeks, we were in Israel, planning this event. And quite frankly, I didn't even know where to begin.
It's interesting. On the one hand, watching Glenn in Israel, it's very emotional because you see how passionate he is about the country and about the people and preserving, this area and this culture.
You don't stand, the world may lose Jerusalem.
We finally came to the Temple Mount excavations, or the southern excavation site. Glenn instantly knew that this is where he wanted to have the event.
That way you can shoot from up there, and you have that beautiful depth.
At the end of this 4-day trip, which we did in 2, I knew the event had to be at the Temple Mount, and I felt good about that decision.
This is where it needs.
Before we left Israel, I had a chance to experience their Memorial Day. It was very somber. The whole nation shut down. And then, as soon as the sun went down, it became Independence Day, and it went from somber to joy in just a moment.
When I got on the plane, everybody is trying to talk me out of it. Everybody keeps telling me, Glenn, this is insane. Glenn, you can't do this. And I want to say to everybody, I know. What do you think? I don't know? I know. Talk to him. Not me. Talk to him. I know. I've been telling him. He's calling the shots, not me.
What America and the international community can do is to state frankly what everyone knows. A lasting peace will involve 2 states for 2 peoples.
Shortly after I had made the announcement that we'd be holding the Restoring Courage event in Israel, the president made a speech that, quite frankly, stunned me.
The United States believes that negotiations should result in 2 states with permanent Palestinian borders with Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, and permanent Israeli borders with Palestine. We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps.
If there ever was any time to stand with Israel, it was right now.
I think one of the difficulties we have in America is our education system is so poor that when you look at graduating seniors coming out of high school, only 15 of them can find Israel on a map. You know, it's graduating after 12 years of school. And so when the president says, hey, let's go to 67 borders, they don't even have a clue what that means because they don't know where Israel is. They don't know all these dozens of countries surrounding it, all the hostility, millions of square miles versus just about 11,000 square miles of sanctuary.
After I heard the president's speech, I kept thinking, how do they possibly survive? How do all the settlements survive when the leader of the free world is basically saying Israel shouldn't be Israel? How could we save it? How could we possibly fix it? I didn't have an answer, except hold on to the truth that God keeps his promises and covenants. After weeks of planning and an incredible effort by my staff, we departed for Israel, and I felt pretty good about the event. But it's my nature to change things anyway.
There are no implied responsibilities even anymore. All that remains are rights.
I'd been thinking about that phrase, freedom's ambassador, and what it meant.
That is why we must declare our responsibilities.
Then we had a refueling stop in Ireland. Shortly after we arrived, we met 2 planefuls of U.S. military personnel. Some were returning from Afghanistan and Iraq. Others were being deployed. You want to talk about ambassadors for freedom.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
you coming or going?
I'm getting ready to go to Iraq.
Stay safe.
Yeah, we'll do.
Shut it down.
When I saw these amazing people, I couldn't help but think to myself how much trouble they're all in. I kept thinking that nobody sees the trouble that's coming. I even told some of them that if I were magically king of the United States, I'd pull our troops out right now. But each one of them asked me the same question. Why? Why would you do that? I was overwhelmed by their bravery, their service. They made me proud. Our servicemen and women are freedom's ambassadors. Once we landed in Israel, the production team went to work. This was no small event. We had more than 50 staff members that were traveling with me. Many of them had been on the ground weeks before I had arrived.
All the video that we're producing for all these events has to be shot in Israel. So we've been here already for, a week or 10 days prior to Glenn getting here because, we had to be in Tel Aviv, we had to be in Haifa, we had to be in Caesarea, we had to be in the Dead Sea, we had to be in Jerusalem. This is stuff you can't do in America. You can't plan ahead. So we're shooting here, we're editing here, we're formatting everything here, and getting it ready for all these events.
There's definitely new challenges. What's interesting about the Israeli culture is what I'm finding is it's very much an in-person dealings and meetings. I knew based on the schedule that it wouldn't be possible to get everyone together, so it's totally fine. I find that since I've been here, we've been able to get so many more projects completed quickly.
It's been really busy the past week or two, and the biggest problem is probably we only had a few months' notice. At least with Restoring Honor, we had a year. This one we had maybe 4 or 5 months, so it's been quite a challenge so far.
Before we began our programs for Restoring Courage, I continued my personal journey. I reflected on a trip I took back in July, where the determination of the Israeli people is beyond anything we'd see in the United States.
I suggested he go to Sderot, which is a small community right across from Gaza, where there are missiles every day in the schoolyards, as people know, have reinforced concrete, so the little school children are protected and they have 15 seconds to run to safety. So I think part of Glenn's connection was from that personal point with children, with the idea of, can we Americans live in that kind of state of fear and worry?
Imagine your children are going to school. Turn around here. Look, first of all, got a little guardhouse. And then you see all these nice little decorative bomb shelters out on the playground.
And I think the other part of it is his search for truth, and he wants to know what the facts are, and that's been his hallmark of debunking myths and trying to present what he thinks are facts.
The mayor gave me a present. It now sits on my set in New York. It serves as a reminder of what some people will do just to live in the land that they feel God has led them to. August 18th. It wasn't a good day for me and my staff. It started when I passed out in my hotel room. I was rushed to the hospital and they treated me for dehydration. Then, later that day, we got a report that gunmen had attacked a bus carrying soldiers near a Red Sea resort. It was the first terrorist attack on Israeli soil in more than 2 years. I knew that people were upset, and they had a right to be. This was a foreign country, and even though the attacks took place in another city a couple of hours away, I knew that most of my staff was thinking, I didn't sign up for this. I felt I needed to get everybody together.
Yesterday was a bad day here in Israel. I just want you to know that you're working for a remarkably different company and a remarkably insane guy. I know that it might get a little tense to think about what we're doing, especially on Wednesday, the location. But I want you to know that we have the best security available.
That was scary. Glenn got very emotional, and you could tell he wasn't feeling well. And I think people were actually scared at that point. The terrorist attacks had just happened. Glenn had gotten out of the hospital. That was probably the lowest point of the trip, and it had just begun.
I'm going to leave you with some good news. I was told, not kidding you, to have cookies and cake. So I figure if that's what the doctor tells me to do, it's good for everybody. So I brought a big, huge chocolate cake. So after this, have a giant piece of really good chocolate cake.
Get to it, Liz.
Okay.
Never underestimate the power of cake. And never underestimate the power of a committed group of talented people. We regrouped and soon focused on the first event.
I mean, it's right on the Mediterranean. Romans definitely knew, or Herod definitely knew where to build.
Caesarea. It was built as part of Herod the Great's ambitious plan to Hellenize the Holy Land in the 1st century. He chose the site of a small Phoenician port called Straton's Tower and laid out a classical Greek city, complete with an amphitheater and a stadium.
You walk in and it's literally an old amphitheater, and so it has this great sense of enclosure and warmth and this beautiful stage with the sea backdrop. It's phenomenal, really, and the program there is going to talk a lot about unity and faith.
Our team had limited access to the venue at Caesarea until the day of the show, so needless to say, rehearsal became a bit of a challenge.
No, Roy, the tenor is on morphine.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
The tenor is on morphine?
What else?
What are we, like, rocking him
What is it?
over?
What else is going to go on in this show?
I have no idea what you're talking about because I can't hear you.
I need cameras ready!
Every live event has bumps in the road, but what are you going to do?
In addition to the difficulties of live programming, and while the venue was still striking, the sun-drenched setting created a less than ideal work environment.
I think anybody who was there was miserable. It was, 1,000 degrees, humid because we were on the coast, and there was no way to get out of the sun except to sit in a tent that was baking like an oven. I mean, it was just, you couldn't escape it.
How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah.
Sderot, Itamar, Tel Aviv.
This was the first image seen on the network, and we were doing it live. Oh boy.
Chance going.
The theater is filling up. People are starting to get amped. I think that's an understatement.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to copy them and get it printed out. Glenn comes on.
Hello, Caesarea.
There's an important distinction of saying, I love Israel and I defend Israel, and not separating that from the Jewish people.
Restoring courage. What is courage? How does courage differ from its fraternal twin, strength? Strength is physical prowess. Courage is spiritual sensitivity.
I felt the event had captured the first step in restoring courage.
Your enemies are our enemies. Your fight is our fight. We are united and we will prevail.
I urge you to make your commitment and decision, no matter where you are on the globe, to make your decision. Choose between life and death.
As I left Caesarea, I remembered what our mission was. We needed to stand. We needed to remember history.
God bless you.
Good night.
So, why remember? So we know what the seeds are and we don't plant those seeds anymore. You want to see where we're headed? Look behind you. Look behind you. It's all repeating itself. We're repeating the 60s, we're repeating the 30s. God forbid. It's all repeating itself. You know, at what point do you wake up?
Joel?
Yes. And the righteous among the nations. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Beck.
Tonight you will see a story of a man who left to come here in the 1930s. He left before the insanity took root and swept the world. He came here. His family was annihilated. He finally went back to his home where his family died in Germany to confront the fear.
זה יהודי וזה גויה, ואותו עצרו על חילול הגזע הגרמני. זה תלוי בבית התפוצות בוושינגטון, בכניסה, התמונה הזאת.
כמה מהאייקונים הנאצים המפורסמים ביותר נולדו באזור הזה. לא במינכן או בברלין, אלא ממש כאן, בנורדן.
What was the experience?
Well, like you said before, coincidence. I went with my grandfather on this journey in 2005, and all I took along with me was my high-8 camcorder. And I think at the beginning I used it mainly to create some kind of a boundary or a border between the Germans and myself. But once I saw how my grandfather deals with them and with his mixed emotions, my anxieties calmed down, and I was able to film and enjoy the filming, and I discovered this great man. The camera loved him, everybody loved him, and so did I.
Her grandfather was able to say, after losing his whole family, he's a rich man. We are rich. No matter what the world wants to do to us, we remain rich.
Is that really is the message of Moses. That's why he says, remember. I mean, anybody who says, you know, oh, it'll never happen again, you're wrong. It's happened 100 times in the past. This is just the most recent and most well documented.
Before the finale of Restoring Courage, I went to the Temple Mount.
They need to print it as a...
Hey, can we just try it with you, just real quick? Do you mind putting it in? You look, you go in, you know, and feel his love right there. So you're... Hit it, and boom, hit it.
And then that starts the...
I made the mistake, I think, on Wednesday morning, 8/24, the morning of the big event, to say, wow, you know, things have really kind of gone pretty well. And I think I jokingly said, you know, knock on whatever wood you can find. And that was, I should not have said that.
It was a beautiful day. The sun rose over Jerusalem on August 24th. Not only was it the day for the final event for Restoring Courage, but it was also Ramadan, and we were sharing the Temple Mount site with thousands of Muslims. My staff always has a security briefing before we do an event, but this one was just a tad more intense for everyone involved.
This event is not being treated as an event, this event is being treated like an operation. In the unlikely event that something should occur, if you are close to the stage, you're going to see two big gates behind the stage. Try to get out those gates and go down the steps as fast as you can. We had a 2-hour meeting with top security yesterday and a 3-hour meeting with the Jerusalem police. And I want you to know that we went through every nook and cranny and went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And this event is being made as safe and secure as humanly possible. Questions?
Spencer, do you guys have is there a circumstance or an event that will lead you to stop the program and take Glenn off the stage?
Imminent risk of life or safety.
Others will be stronger.
For the very first time, I had a speechwriter help me prepare my address, mainly because what I had written was more than 10,000 words. The speechwriter helped me trim it down to 3,000 by the time the final draft was in hand.
You want to hear the speech? Let's get ready to that.
Okay, you ready?
To walk, to march, to speak, arm in arm behind the pillar of God's fire. Lo ira, I fear not, for God is with me.
I think it's your most well-structured speech.
He took 9,000, I think I had it to 9,000 words and cut it down to 3,100. I mean, he's a magician. I bet you that the press just bypasses the pages.
Just don't cover it?
Here we go.
One of the things I'm most proud of with Mercury, my company, is that at live events or any event, when we're having problems, our crew is the best at fixing things.
Okay, so it's no longer standby.
They are really so good that I rarely know that anything is wrong. And that's pretty good, because if I had known then what I know now...
Here we go.
Keep that.
Please look around like there's a leaf on the stage.
Effort is underway that would force Israel to defy.
We were prepping for the pre-show, and I have headsets on, and I'm listening to the director, David Stern, in my ear, and we're getting shots, and he's trying to juggle. Here's a shock. The entire main show format had changed. an hour before. Glenn had changed his mind. I know that'll shock you. So he's juggling this, and I hear him keep saying, guys, I've got to rehearse this pre-show. We're on in less than 30 minutes.
Stand by.
How's the rundown going?
Stand by.
Andrea?
Meanwhile, I have like police in the background beginning to let in the crowd because the line's getting too long, and I have LJ, who handles our ticketing, running around saying, no, we're not ready, we're not ready.
Where's up? That's only one channel audio, guys.
I hear you're the first voice I've heard.
There is a lot going on, and right before the big pre-show, the day of the big event, we lost our connection.
And so we're going back and forth, we're getting shots, and all of a sudden I hear, and I think it was about 10 minutes to air, he says, we've lost our satellite. We have no connection. And I said, what do you mean we have no connection? He said, we're dead in the water. We're not connected. We're not going out anywhere.
Normally, we have a number of backups for such emergencies. But for some reason...
And oh, by the way, somebody better go find LiveView, which is this cellular-based backpack unit that lets you go live if you get a cell phone connection, because that may be our only way to get this event out of here.
I didn't know until about 5 minutes to air when I get a phone call from Tim, the lead engineer. Hey, where's LiveView? We're down, that's our backup. I mean, if you could just see the look on my face, I felt like I really messed up.
I was responsible for that amongst many other things, and I dropped the ball on that one.
What's LiveView?
LiveView is the only way we can get this show over to New York, broadcast on Insider Extreme.
Hey Jay, if you need him to go get it, have him go get it.
I mean, I actually saw the color drain out of Joel's face, which is something you don't see because he's always so calm.
One thing I've learned, at some point technology and planning will all fail. Sometimes things just go wrong, and then you go to plan B.
Tiffany to Karen.
Or C.
Because right now, our printer power is down.
Or divine intervention.
It all fell apart. I mean, everything fell apart. And I'm sweating, and I hear, we got the shot back. We're up in 10 seconds, everybody. 10, 9, 8. And at that point, again, the shot came back. We started the show as if nothing had happened.
Live from Jerusalem, Israel, this is GBTV coverage.
I can live with this. This is great. 6:30 on headsets. Ready? Hear me, Cal?
Welcome to Jerusalem. It is my honor to host you here, standing at the heart of ancient Jerusalem.
That looks good there. Looks good. Can't write.
There are many who claim we have no right to be in the state of Israel. When our Christian brothers and sisters, after 2,000 years of persecuting us,
We need to be ready, set to go for Glenn.
extend their hands and their hearts in embrace and in love.
Go Glenn. Here comes Glenn. Glenn's out. Glenn's out.
The world is waiting for someone to lead. Well, we will lead. We will be led by the brave. There are leaders rising up now, and they are brave. Today you will hear the stories and the words of brave people.
We've got 5 award winners, correct? 5, F-I-V-E.
One of the great moments of restoring courage, one of the highlights, was the presentation of the merit badges for faith, hope, and charity. When it came to the Fogel family, I found real hope in them. Because I found obedience, and that's where hope comes from. Obedience.
When faith is tested, there are only 2 possible alternatives: to waver and lose heart, or to remain steadfast. Those whom we honor today remained steadfast in faith in God that He has a plan, no matter the difficult situation. And there are very few, if any, more trying circumstances than the one faced by this family.
Nestled in the Samaritan Mountain region is the town of Itamar. To the residents of this mostly Orthodox Jewish community, Itamar is a sacred land. The settlement is in the heart of the region once known as the Kingdom of Israel. The State of Israel established the community of Itamar in 1984. Udi and Ruth Fogel had the right to live there, but it was their obligation to God that called them to this place. Their dream was to live, worship, and raise their family in this biblical region. The Fogels were seen as the kind of people whose generosity and love might help end the cycle of violence in the region. A fence separates Itamar from the dangers that often surround the village. But on March 11th, no fence was going to stop the evil that was determined to enter. At 10:30 p.m., the Fogel family became targets of a murderous attack by Palestinian terrorists. 11-year-old Yoav would be the first victim. As he sat in his bed, reading, he heard the killers, 2 teenagers. They assured him not to be afraid. Then they mercilessly slashed his throat and stabbed his small chest. Then 4-year-old Elad was brutally stabbed as he lay in his bed. Udi and Ruth rushed to defend their family, but their struggle was overwhelmed by the rage of the terrorists. They were both repeatedly stabbed, then shot. Before the murderers left the bloody scene, 3-month-old Hadass began to cry. Then, in a heinous moment, they returned and slaughtered the baby. As 12-year-old Tamar Fogel returned home that evening, she discovered her 2-year-old brother lying next to her lifeless parents, crying and shaking them, as her 8-year-old brother remained hidden in his room, fearing the attack was not over. Tamar and her 2 little brothers are all that remain of the Fogel family. But in this young girl, we find a message for all the world to hear when she declared, "I will be strong and succeed in overcoming this. I understand the task that stands before me, and I will be a mother to my brothers." Faith. Faith led the Fogel family to Itamar. And now, through their children, they leave the world with the message that nothing will silence the courageous message of faith.
Accepting the Restoring Courage for Faith on behalf of the Fogel family and the entire community of Itamar is the town's mayor, Rabbi Moshe, and his wife Leah Goldsmith.
The Fogel family reminded me that God is a God of covenants. He said to Abraham, "You just do these things and you'll be my chosen people. I'll be your God. Israel will fall, Jerusalem will fall, but it will come back." I was also inspired by the other 2 recipients, a grocery store entrepreneur and a couple of restaurant owners.
In the midst of tragedy, this extraordinary restaurant gave the community and an entire nation extraordinary hope.
October 4th, 2003. It was just like any other busy Saturday at the popular local restaurant Maxime. All the regulars were there, along with many other patrons, just enjoying the renowned food from the Haifa mainstay. But Maxime's real appeal serves a much higher calling than merely great food. Co-owned by an Arab and a Jew, it's also frequented by both. Maxime's has become a symbol of peaceful coexistence. But this show of unity also meant Maxime was something else, a target. On that day, nearly 8 years ago, an unassuming 28-year-old woman slipped past security unnoticed and made her way to the center of the restaurant. No one suspected that strapped tightly to her body, concealed underneath her clothing, was an explosive suicide belt. She detonated it, killing 21 Arabs, Jews, 4 children, and a 2-month-old baby. 51 others were injured. This horrific tragedy could have easily spelled the end of Arab and Jewish harmony at Maxime. But right after the attack, both owners were determined not to let that happen. They posted a sign at the site of the decimated restaurant. It read, "We will not allow coexistence to be destroyed." A mere 2 months later, determined not to let a good thing die, Maxime, with makeshift memorials still around the area, reopened their doors. What happened next was nothing short of a beautiful miracle. The community flocked to the restaurant. The staff could barely keep up with the orders. They proved this was much more than just peaceful coexistence. They were one. and still are today. It takes courage to stand as one. It takes courage to love thy neighbor. Courage in hope.
Here to accept the Restoring Courage Award for Hope on behalf of the Maxime Restaurant, Orly Tayar-Nir and Olivia Matar. Sometimes it is just a simple act of kindness, compassion, love, indeed charity, can make all the difference in changing the world.
For charity to thrive, individuals must reach out and touch those in need. Institutions don't change hearts, individuals do. Rami Levy understands this perhaps better than anybody in Israel. He grew up in a one-room tin shack in Jerusalem, but through hard work and determination, he turned a 400-square-foot shop into Israel's fastest-growing supermarket chain. Today, there are 21 locations, employing more than 3,000 people. However, creating jobs and building new stores isn't what sets Rami apart from other successful businessmen. His store at the Gush Etzion Junction is a model of coexistence. Arabs and Jews shopping and working together. But beyond that, Rami has established a focus on providing charity in the form of discounted and even free food for low-income individuals of all faiths. His actions reveal his heart. During Ramadan, Rami makes sure that Muslim shoppers have the elements to observe this period of obedience, even if that means giving it to them for free, sometimes in an unmarked bag, hoping his customers avoid being harassed for shopping in a store owned by a Jew. His generous acts have not always been embraced. He has been threatened by numerous radical organizations, including Hamas, who find this shining example of peaceful coexistence threatening. No government agreement, no UN charter, no document is more powerful than the courage of one man simply opening a store to everyone. Levy stores continue to perform well, despite strong opposition and even boycotts. Rami Levy remains on the path of good. It takes courage to do what is right, courage to provide opportunities, courage in charity.
Accepting the Restoring Courage Award for Charity, Rami Levy.
Today, the world needs courage more than ever before. We need it because whether you live in Jerusalem or in London or in Athens, Madrid, or Washington, D.C., you know, we all know, the world's changing just a little bit. This week they were holding up signs in Cairo that said, quote, "We are building the gas chambers." They dress their children in suicide belts. They are given the choice, and they choose death. We are given the choice. Let us choose life. Let us have the courage to say, no more incitement, no more threats, no more terror, no more talk of genocide, no more hate, no more fear, no more lies. No man can promise you safety, prosperity, or comfort. But I can promise you this today. One day, your children and your grandchildren will come to you and ask you, what did you do? What did you do when the world was on fire? when the world was on the edge again? What did you say when the West or Israel or the Jew was blamed again? I promise you this. You will be able to look them in the eye and say, I had courage. On the 24th of Av, I stood. I committed to stand with courage, to walk, to march, arm in arm behind God's pillar of fire. God is with me. I fear not. Thank you.
Story, let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. How justice was our battle and how justice was denied. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, tell them there are battles that are more than black or white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Go out and tell this story to your daughters and your sons. Make them. Make them. That's right. And tell them in your struggles you were not the only one. Make them hear you. Got to make them hear you. Your sword can be a sermon or the power of your pen. Teach every child to raise his voice, and then, my brothers, then will justice be demanded by 10 million righteous men? Oh, make them hear you. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. You gotta make them hear you. Make them hear you.
come. Maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe somebody else is just like, well, I guess maybe they're empowered to do something that they're supposed to do. And I said this last year. Well, maybe the Lord is going to leave me alone for a while. I don't feel it. Last year I did. Since this journey began, with all the hate that I have experienced, my love has grown. My love has grown. Profoundly, my love has grown. To not just the people who live here, but also what happens to people. Is it love of country, love of faith, love of God, love of history that makes you stand? I think for them, it's that. Where you find your hope are the people who are remembering all that God has done for them. Teaching their children, because their children didn't live through it and they won't know and they won't remember. And obeying Him. Restoring courage was more than a tribute or a call to stand with Israel. For me, it was a clear and present warning, a call to understand the storm that is on the horizon. If we are to be freedom's ambassadors, then we must understand that freedom rarely comes without sacrifice. There is such a thing as right and wrong. Evil does exist. History repeats itself. We must be on guard. We must continually fall to our knees and pray for wisdom.
Tomorrow's going to be a tough day for me. If last year was any indication, but it won't come as a surprise this year. I will be able to pray and prepare for it. Last year, the next morning after 8:28, I could barely function at the beginning because I worried that I hadn't heard Him. I didn't, I was foolish enough to read the press where they said, what does this even mean? Doesn't make a difference. What did He do? And I was worried that that I had somehow or another dropped the ball. But I think it was just, last year was to prepare those who would listen, and I think prepare me for this time. What this prepares me for now, I don't know.